Now we come to a very exciting part of the session, which is a candid chat between Mr. Harsh Neotia, Chairman of the Ambuja Neotia Group, a very dear person to ICC and CREDAI Bengal, is very much here, and Mr. Anuj Puri. Mr. Puri, I leave it all to you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paramita. I mean, Harsh doesn't really need an introduction, but I will do a little bit of a formal introduction. I mean, he's someone who's charted his path in real estate. As I said, at the start, he says that he's an accidental builder. I think pretty reluctant to have gone into real estate, and today, a very big brand, exceptional work that he and his team do. Really, the businesses range from housing to hospitality to healthcare to education, does a huge amount of charitable work, lots of awards and recognitions. I'm not going to go through it. I wasn't aware, Harsh, that you were a Harvard alumni to be able to talk to you. I've only got 6 questions, Harsh. The first is an easy one: Biden versus Trump. Who you think is going to win? Sorry, Harsh, you're on mute. Sorry, Harsh, you're on mute.
I think the world would do well to have Biden, but it appears it's going the Trump way. Since it's an election for Americans, they have obviously, they have to make that choice, and it appears they're making that choice. But that's all I have to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope that it happens all smoothly. There isn't, much of untoward incidents that happen, because world is certainly watching US, and it'll be an interesting story over the next 2 or 3 days as the results come out. Coming to India, Harsh, what Pradeep said and Nandu said is that, we seem to be sort of coming on more firmer grounds as an economy. Some of the data points that came in from the government, and Honorable Finance Minister detailed it out earlier during the week. It seems that the economy may have gone through the bad phase, and we are now on firmer ground. My question to you is, Harsh, are we ahead of the bad times?
Well, I think we've certainly sort of crossed the hump, so to say. But having said that, I would put a little caution that we must know that 3 months everything was shut. So there is a certain lag effect, and there is a certain pent-up demand that is also coming up now. I think we have to see how it sustains over the next 6 months to really be sure that we are, yes, there is no doubt that there are green shoots and that we are certainly on the way to recovery. The question is, will it be a V-shaped recovery or a little flatter V? I have no measure of doubt that we will recover. It's just a question of how fast we will do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, Harsh, there have been a lot of these symbols. The last that I heard was K. And I'm like, K, how does it happen? And I said, some sectors are going to go up, some sectors are going to come down. So it is a K-shaped recovery.
More than sectors, the K, I think, represents that some people are going to do well and some people not. And that is quite evident that, as you saw in the pandemic, the well-to-do continued to do well and perhaps even grew, whereas the marginalized and the poor, and particularly the unorganized sector, actually went into poverty. So this is a problematic space that we are in, and it's not unique to India, but it is there in the world. This pandemic has actually exposed the underbelly of this contradiction, where in spite of the pain, there is some that have actually not felt it, and some that have felt it very severely.
I agree with that. And Harsh, once the world starts to settle in, maybe 12 months later, world will be a little bit more settled, or hopefully much more settled than where we are today. The vaccine should be out. Much of the population should have got immunized by the end of next calendar year at least. How would India stack up in the world ranking? what's the thought? Because, if you look at history, Harsh, with every, large scale disruption that happened, whether it was the World War or the other global recessions, the world order changed. It'll be interesting to hear your opinion. What's your thought? How India's ranking may or may not change?
No, India certainly, in an overall sense, I don't see us not doing extremely well. And that's simply because we are so far behind in terms of in general the economy that we have nowhere to go but up. So that's one part. But the question is, what will be the nature of that recovery? Will it be equitable or will it be highly inequitable? And that's one of the things that worry many people, and including me. And I think that's what we have to be mindful of. The other thing is that how are we going to make sure that we are able to see the entire situation of the geopolitics of the world, which is now taking a shift. The unipolar world with US dominating has obviously given way to now a bipolar world with China as the other pole. Uh, there is a expansionist tendency of China, how that is going to impact the trade relationships between the various countries. And we have China and Pakistan in our neighborhood, which we are having some problems with. So how that is going to play out. So I think economy is not going to be any more unrelated to geopolitics. I think these are going to somewhere converge. And one will have to see that how do we sort of manage these tensions and then continue to grow in the post-pandemic world.
Yeah, and you beautifully said, Harsh. I do completely agree with you. Is that it is now going to be intertwined, the geopolitics and the economies at a global level, which previously they were not. They were quite independent to each other. But I think the way the world has gone over the last 5 years, it does appear that there is going to be a lot more intertwining with very strong leadership many of the countries like India has today. Coming to our sector, Harsh, the real estate sector, which of the sections or subsectors do you think are going to do well? You are in hospitality, you are in residential, you are in office, you are in retail. What is your thought? Which of those are going to do better than the others?
So very clearly in that spectrum, if you were put it, hospitality will be the hopeless bad end, and residential will be on the best end of it. But as
But Harsh, you say about the hospitality. I'm telling you, you're just not getting in booking in any of these hotels, particularly the ones that you have, the resort type hotels.
Yeah, if you want to go for a holiday, there is a bit of a sweet spot. But I think if you want to check for a holiday into Mumbai, you'll find a lot of rooms at very cheap rates. Anyway, so I think hospitality is going to be a slow recovery, and simply because the flights haven't opened up fully, international travel is still there. And then the whole issue of digital economy taking a certain central role in the way we conduct ourselves. A lot of us would be flying across to meet each other. We're doing that over technology platforms and virtual platforms. I'm sure some of this is going to stay on beyond the pandemic. So not that everything will stay on this way, hopefully not, because I think people want to meet people. At the end of the day, we are social animals. But some of it will. And I think there will be a refiguring out that is necessary in the hospitality space. Coming to the residential, as you very rightly observed, there is people now are looking for the security of a home more than ever before. I mean, by nature, we had all become a bit nomadic. And as you rightly observed, the millennials thought that it's a big bloody pain to have a house. Why just rent it, hire a place, etc. I think there's a revisiting of that, particularly when you are hunkered in for 6 months into a space. You realize that this is something that is very important, and that you'd rather have one than not one. So that is one, and therefore the younger people are rethinking their very nomadic kind of an approach to something which may not be that nomadic. The other is, as you said, the people are looking for a little more space because everyone needs a little private space. Your children are studying from home. If you are two members in the family or both working from home, you are going to have chaotic conversations with various people disturbing each other. So I think there is need for space. So all this, certainly I feel there is a possibility of a good pickup in the residential space. But I think it will be more towards ready apartments or near ready apartments than from booking. I think people would still prefer that, because if you have the money or you have the ability to sort of pay the EMIs, you'd rather move into this new apartment. And then, as you also observed, I've also seen that this bunching of demand towards more credible developers is certainly very, very high, particularly in the booking space. In the ready space, I think the difference is not so very stark.
Yes.
You see the product, and if someone who's not got a great track record but has done a good job, I think he'll find a buyer. But when it comes to booking, and when you don't see the product, you've just seen a plan and maybe just work started on the ground with 3-4 years to go before you're going to get possession of the apartment, I think there's a lot of fear in people's mind about completion of projects, quality of projects that are completed. And that is where your past sort of track record comes into play, a very significant role in building that trust factor with the public.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Spot on. Harsh, one of the things that, over the last 4 or 5 years, much of the real estate stakeholders and particularly the developers did was leverage. You've been very averse to it. You've not been excited. You've never been tempted, on that, and expensive leverage. When the market was getting crazy and there was a huge amount of cash liquidity available, which was high cost debt, why did you not get excited, enamored, coaxed into taking this? What was it that kept you away?
No. I don't think I am away from all police. We have made our own mistakes. I have built much much higher than some.
Yeah. Please go ahead.
So I have had my share of follies in the business. But yes, I have not been very excited about high leverage, simply because you are always mindful of one thing, that life comes in cycles. And if you do something which is disproportionate at some point of time, it comes to haunt you. Now, you never know when to time it perfectly. It is true that we have missed out great opportunities when things were going up. Simultaneously, we have been somewhat saved when things didn't go so well. So now this is you can't see it in the context of 5 years. You have to see it in the context of 10 years or more. And when you see it in that, then I think this strategy looks sensible. When you see it in a shorter span of time, you usually feel like a fool because you seem to have missed out on great opportunities. The other is that because with God's grace, we have tried to do things in a certain way, we've not been able to get that many projects. We don't want to do very tiny projects. We don't want to deal in cash. And when you put all these problems away, then you start narrowing down the opportunities. And that was also something that happened. So if you see the number of projects that we are doing at any given point of time, there's not too many. I really do wish that we could have more, but we were not somehow able to get that many. And we were not able to create the regulatory sort of process in time to launch many. So it's not like we didn't try, but we weren't able to do it.
Well, you're blessed, I can tell you, Harsha. If you would ask this question to many of the people who are on the screen, they would be very happy to be in your position today. Harsh, there have been a lot of lessons that have been learned in these 8 or 9 months. My fear is when the markets come back, we tend to forget these lessons. And we've seen that in the past, 2008, global financial crisis happened. And, there was a huge amount of pressure on the liquidity, on the leverage. And 4 or 5 years thereafter, people had forgotten. What do you think will be 2 things that we're going to continue to remember, which will really change as a habit?
I don't think anything will permanently change which will always remain. We are like a rubber band. We will expand in a situation and contract back to our old ways. See, there are few things, fundamentally, this is one of the biggest shocks anyone alive and anyone watching this has ever faced. And therefore, this is going to certainly have a much more lasting impact than anything else that has had in our life. Uh, but having said that, it is not going to be everlasting. So lasting means earlier, if the impact lasted 1 or 2 years, maybe this impact will last 3 to 5 years. But it will come back in some measure, because people become, memory is not there, and then you move on to a new kind of existence, and then you forget all these things. And who remembers a sad story anyway? And nobody wants to also. So I think that is true. But few things, like for instance, technology now taking a center stage is probably is an inevitable Rubicon that we have crossed. Not that we hadn't already had it in place, but it has speeded up and it has become much more pervasive than perhaps it would have been had the COVID not happened. This has sort of accelerated that process in a way that probably will not go back. The second is that there is a philosophical construct as to what happens to a person's mind. When you see the world wars, and there were two kinds of people that emerged. Either you become a little spiritual, you tend to feel that, all this quest for, and a lot of my friends, we are talking and we think about it, that what is this rat race all about? You had enough time to reflect and think. And are you going to do the same things? Because when you think quietly and you think for hours, remember one thing, this is a very interesting point that I want to mention here, is never have so many bright people actually been locked down at home. Just think of it. In our entire lifetime, can you imagine that the biggest and the brightest brains of the world have actually been locked in at home? And now what do you do beyond a certain amount of rest and a certain amount of binge watching Netflix? You're going to spend a lot of time with yourself thinking. And certainly the bright people think deeply. Now, if the brightest minds in the world have been locked up and they are in good health, they are not sick, and yet they are not able to do the normal things, they are saving a tremendous amount of time and they are thinking. And I'm sure that this thinking is going to lead to some changes. So, as I said, one could be that the mindless pursuit of material sort of progress, and we've seen even the skies clear up because pollution was low, and we much enjoyed it. That from Ludhiana you could see the mountains. It was a beautiful photograph that came, and people said they haven't seen that in 50 years or 40 years. So this is something that we've all cherished. Would we want to all give it up and say, no, we're going to go back to the old norms? Well, not necessarily. The other, of course, counter view is that people can become hedonistic. There is the hippie culture that developed immediately after the World War, where people said, okay, now I have peace and I now want to really have a binge. So maybe now I have the vaccine and I know I can't get infected, and let's go and party real hard because I missed it for 2 years. So I think there is going to be a split in this. I'm not. Everyone is not going to become spiritual, and everyone is not going to be hedonistic. But I think the world will split into these two types of. I'm talking very extreme kind of personalities, but there will be obviously a lot more in the middle who will kind of readjust to a new normal.
Love it, Harsh. Beautiful, beautiful the way that you've said it. And I hope in the first category there are more people than in the second category, and the world becomes a much better place.
Anuj, just as a caveat, if we do become more spiritual, the one casualty is that economy will actually have to be reset downwards, because it's the hedonistic variety of people that actually fuel the economy. And I'm not saying that economy is the sole and only reason for us to exist. We have many more reasons to exist, but unfortunately, we measure our success and prosperity only on economic growth. And when people become spiritual and less materialistic, they have lesser needs. and therefore lesser products, and therefore lesser production, and therefore lesser consumption. So there is a fallout of that. We often think like, there was an argument somebody made to me that, the Indian big fat wedding is such a waste. I said, think 1 minute. It is a waste if you look at it in one way, but in another way, it's a great economy generator. And that too, to whom? There are lots of artisans and workers and etc. and people. The great Durga Puja we have in Calcutta. I mean, I don't know how much enormous amount of money is spent in those pandals, and then they are all demolished 5 days later. But look at the economy that it creates. So there is a view that, it's such a wasteful expenditure. There is another view that says, look at the amount of employment and jobs it creates. So I don't know. Frankly speaking, I am split in my own thinking on this. I don't know what the right answer is. But these are the thoughts that are sort of engaging my mind at this moment. I suppose we'll find our median somewhere.
Absolutely. We got a comment on the chat, Harsh. Beautiful thoughts by Harshji, by a guy called Sunil. So, thank you very much. And I absolutely agree. My final two questions, Harsh, to you is, we went into this pandemic, and we're now going to hopefully come out over the next 6-9 months, whatever it is. Both you and I agree that we are perhaps at a firmer ground than where we were 3 or 4 months ago. And hopefully we will remain very disciplined so that we don't go back to a weak ground. Coming into Calcutta real estate, what's your thought on comparison before COVID and after COVID?
Well, I think broadly it will follow the same trajectory as in other parts of India, which means if you have a good product, you will find a market for it. I think the launches will be less than it was in the recent past. It may pick up again a year later, but initially there will be a bit of a slowdown in launches. People would rather wait to get the inventory cleared because the cost of interest is very bothersome to everyone. So they would want to, before they burden themselves up with new debt, etc., to get rid of it. Joint ventures will perhaps take a fillip with credible developers because some of the builders may want to exit from this business altogether simply because the compliance cost has become onerous and expensive and troublesome. We have activist consumers, we have courts, we have RERA, we have, the debt market is tough and even selling is tough. So I think if you put it all together, it's a perfect storm. So I think we need to recalibrate ourselves. So I think there's going to be a churn for sure. It's going to take its own time because it's not so easy in real estate to do M&As. In half-built projects, some projects have come to us. It's difficult to get into the shoes, even though we find it financially viable, because sometimes the brand fit on the design, the brand fit on so many other aspects, and the commitment made to the customers become a challenge to navigate. So I think there are issues. There are many more issues than doing an M&A with let's say another cement plant to another cement plant or something like that. So I think M&As are tough in this business. So therefore, resolution to this will be a little long drawn and complicated. But I do see that as something that serious attempts will be made.
Actually, my final question, before I ask one personal question to you, my final question on this topic is, what are the two things that you will say to our developer friends on the screen that they should be really aware of going forward, or they should perhaps do more of it or less of it? What are those two things that you would say?
One is that we must be very, very conscious about the quality of the product. Today, the consumer has become very, very...
I agree.
So therefore, that is something that we need to invest on. And it's not just about how you build it. It's right from the stage of designing it, understanding, we see a drawing which is on a tabletop-sized plan, but that thing gets built 100 times over into a gigantic structure. We have to visualize how it will be when you actually walk into that space, the air, the ventilation, the the light, the quality of light, and besides, of course, then the finishing and the various amenities. So we are also learning, frankly speaking. I'm nobody to tell anyone, because I realize how many things we could have done better. But then that's how life is. But hopefully, every day we try to do the next project better than the previous one, and that's the only thing we can do. But so that's one thing. The other, of course, is that I think it would be wise to see that your debt equity stretch is limited, so that you can navigate this, because you are never sure when you will face a headwind of a low market, and you can't get stuck in the middle. It's not like everybody who's got stuck have actually taken the money out or done something wrong, which is a popular perception. A lot of people have got stuck simply because they have not been able to sell even a good product, and they have not been able to sell because the markets have been bad, and they don't have a debt available for them, so they just stuck. And this is unfortunate, but that's because the markets have really not supported. But of course, one can argue that one has to factor, but nobody factors in that if you need 200 crores to build a building, that you will have all the 200 crores. You will assume that a certain amount will be sold, and what happens if that sale doesn't happen? So this is a problem that a lot of genuine good builders have unfortunately found themselves stuck in. And I think everyone will learn a lesson from this to be a little more conservative in the future.
So two things. One, just be careful on debt. And second is make sure that there is quality delivery that is happening, because the customer has become very discerning. And certainly with social media going on, it can become pretty hostile. My last one, which is a little personal, Harsh. Harsh, as a person, what would have changed January 2020, January 2021?
A lot. I think
So you've grown a beard for one.
that's very physical, but I think I've had the great time to actually think and reflect a lot of my priorities. I'm sure I've sort of not yet come to very definitive conclusions in the way forward. But strangely enough, in spite of all the stress, we are quite heavily invested in hospitality. We are in retail, which is hurting. We are in office space, which may not be hurting much, but it's not sort of buoyant really. And we are in residential that was shut till it picked up in the last couple of months. So 80% of my family investment was in these 3-4 areas, and all of them were very, very badly hit. So I've never faced a crisis of this magnitude in my life, and therefore, for the first 15 days, it was very, very disturbing. But then I realized when I saw the pictures of the migrant workers on the television, and I was sitting, and I remember one particular show really hit me, because I saw people trying to, eat from food thrown on the ground, and carrying children on their head, and walking with blisters on their feet with scorching temperature and thousands of kilometers. Something moved the needle in me, and I said, what am I complaining about? Here I am sitting in home, air conditioned. uh, I have good food to eat. I have fortunately enough space in my home even to do my morning walk, even if I can't go out. uh, what am I complaining about? Just because if my wealth was X, it has become half X, or uh, one third X, whatever it was. I mean, that's all that has gone. And it's not like I'm in the road. So when I saw that, something shifted, and I said, no, I must wake up to be grateful, not to be complaining. Grateful that I have not got COVID till now. That's a very big thing. Grateful that I live in a home with loving family members, and that fortunately all of us were safe and well. And grateful that we were not in the plight that so many of our countrymen were. And I think that sense of gratitude is something that I will carry with me forward, because that is what I learned through this pandemic. And not to complain about what didn't happen or something that went wrong, but to really be grateful for what we have.
Beautiful, Harsh. As always, it's absolutely an honor to have a conversation with you. Very candid, very honest. You're a very compassionate man. Which comes out from every word that you speak. There's so much for all of us to learn from you. One of the things that we're going to all take away today is this word grateful or gratitude. This is very powerful, and it is true. All of us would have had similar feelings as what you've had in the first 2 or 3 weeks post the pandemic, because how you run businesses, wealth would have dwindled, stock market was crumbling, crashing, and many of us had similar thoughts. And the way that you've resurrected your thoughts are so pure, which is a form that Harsh Neotia represents. So thank you very much. Delighted to have this conversation. Paramita, I'm handing it back to you.